Thank you very much. And first of all, a big thank you to NSF for inviting me today. It's been a really interesting day. Learned an awful lot about the industry, so it's a pleasure to be here. So my task today is to share with you a little bit of the work we're doing on borders, and also tie into that what we're doing with NSF and how we see the future possibilities of some of the work we're doing together, and how that benefits us now that we're exiting the EU. So for those of you that don't know Fujitsu, we are a Japanese company, a technology company, about 140,000 of us globally, as in employees, and probably about 20,000 or so in the UK. The UK is the biggest part of our business outside of Japan. And about half of our business in the UK is government-based. So if you use your e-gates to get through passport control, that'll go through a Fujitsu checking system to make sure you've been checked against warnings index and things like that. If you are unfortunate enough to have to make declarations and the like, declarations and the like, that'll go through Chief System and other such systems which runs on Fujitsu technology. So we're well established within most of the government agencies and border agencies. And my job is to look at what the future can hold in terms of how can we use new and emerging technology to help, in particular now that we're exiting the EU, help us run an efficient border. The whole point of that being, obviously it promotes trade, GDP growth, etc. Quite a topical subject at the moment. How do I move this, or is it just next? There we go. So topics I wanted to cover are EU exit challenges around road freight. Borders is such an enormous subject. So we've been focusing on road freight because it's one of the particular challenges for EU exit. Obviously, goods can come in and out of the country using air freight. It can come in, on deep sea, etc. That is pretty much controlled, and there will be some changes with the EU exit, but there's a lot of regulation in there. But trucks, they move across the channel, both sides, as in the Irish Sea and the English Channel on the other side, or is it the French Channel? Without any real regulation. They just drive across there. You might as well be driving Manchester to Birmingham in that regard. So that's going to change. So we focused on that as one of the immediate priorities, as it were. How do we tackle this? Well, we went around thinking what's best practice, what looks good around the world. We came up with the idea of the smart port or drive-through border concept, which I'll talk to you about, which is the learning from best practice globally. And then we've got this big challenge of how do you make this real? How do you actually deliver something? And I'll explain a little bit around the challenges of trying to do that, because we can't tell the government to do this, and we'll use these systems, etc. And then a little bit about our collaboration with NSF. And really interested in what Maria was saying. There's a number of buzzwords in Maria's presentation that absolutely resonated with me, and indeed in some of the other topics we've covered today that I thought made me do the aha moment. We're on the right track. So exit. We have exited. We've got the withdrawal agreement, so we have exited. A few people don't seem to understand that we have exited. The next step is, will we get a free trade agreement or not? Will there be a further agreement by the end of the year? So come the end of this year, in January next year, if we want to move goods into mainland Europe and back again, we'll need some sort of customs process, because they will be in two different customs unions. And the same applies for Republic of Ireland. That is part of the EU. Northern Ireland has its own little challenges there, because it will exist in both customs unions. So the real challenge for us when we have a customs border is we're now going to have new barriers to trade, in effect, unless we can smooth this through. So how will you get fresh food from Spain, fresh oranges and the like, into the UK in a timely manner? How will we get supermarkets get their produce into stores in the Republic of Ireland, for example, because that model exists today. They're moving fresh goods around. The dairy industry is super connected across the island of Ireland. That border doesn't really exist. So we need an efficient mechanism. A lot of it is to do with policy, but technology can play a role. So we broke it down into two key themes. Down in the southeast there, it's more about flow, because there's 17,000 odd vehicles a day going through that thing. And the top left, we talked about traceability, and we've given some arrows there to show you that there's lots of trade routes. Vehicles don't just travel from GB to NI, and I'm using GB as the kind of England, Scotland, Wales bit there, NI as Northern Ireland, obviously, so together they make UK, and then you've got IE for Republic of Ireland. But depending on what route we take, with goods and returns and things like that, will determine how much customs processes you're going to have to follow. So, for example, we were talking to a retailer the other day that sells clothes, effectively. They have stores in GB, they have stores in IE, and stores in NI. Now, if you buy one of their clothes online, and you live in the Republic of Ireland, you live in Dublin, etc., you don't pay any customs duties or anything for that today. So they might order 4 shirts, 2 pink ones, 2 blue ones, 2 different sizes, and they send 3 back. It's not unusual. Now, that whole process means you've exported and imported twice for 3 items that nobody's bought. So, yeah, exactly. There are all sorts of challenges. So wherever we go, and we're talking to a lot of organisations, the complexities of their supply chain are just amazing. So it's not just fresh foods, it's ambient foods and products like textiles that have got this challenge as well. But we talked about them, we've categorised them into two zones like that. And the first one is, if we look at Northern Ireland, there's the wonderful province of Northern Ireland, land of Northern Ireland. That's the border, and there's no infrastructure there, obviously, and there's no intention of any infrastructure going into that. So the real challenge of EU exit for the Northern Ireland region is going to be, it will exist in 2 customs regions. It'll be in the UK customs region and UK sovereignty, but it will also exist in the EU customs region. Now, if you can work that out, then congratulations, because I don't think anyone's quite worked out how that's going to work going forward. So there's a real challenge here. We don't want any infrastructure on the border, and we want goods to move up and down, north and south, freely, as they do today. Really critical for the dairy industry. I know I spent just over a year wandering around, talking to people in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland on the challenges of EU exit. So we know how interconnected those supply chains are and how vital it is to keep those supply chains open. But how do we move goods from GB into Northern Ireland? Because they could quite easily go south into Republic of Ireland. If there's a declaration, it's then going from UK into the EU. There must be a customs declaration for that. There might even be some payments for that. So it's complicated. Where do you make that process happen? The EU are saying, you need to raise a declaration to go into Northern Ireland. So if I'm shipping pens just to Northern Ireland, I've now got to make a declaration, is the EU point, just to move that product into Northern Ireland. And we're saying, but it's not going into the Republic, it's just going to stay there. Well, you can claim that back then, if you prove it stays in Northern Ireland. Now, it's a difficult thing in many, many ways, because it's the same customs union. So how do you make an import and export declaration in the same customs union? You don't do it between Birmingham and Manchester. So it's really, really complicated. This is all a policy issue. So that's one of the main challenges around the trading into Northern Ireland in the future. And then in Dover, the one I mentioned before, and similar for Eurotunnel, it's one of capacity. So you can see there, that's pretty much Dover. It's a tiny, tiny port, and there's a cliff behind it, so you can't build backwards or sideways. That's all reclaimed space there, so that is the ocean really, but it's container park at the moment. Three vessels in at the moment. Those trucks basically drive off the boats and drive through the port. There's nothing there. There sometimes are border force officers with high-vis jackets on, and they might stop you and ask you what's in the truck, but very, very small percentages, less than 1%. So it's free-flowing, and it's free-flowing and it has that capacity. and that size, and that works. But if you start to decide to stop the vehicle and just say, can I have a declaration, please? You're going to cause chaos. It won't work. And there have been lots of numbers around 2-minute stops causing 27 miles. It just won't work. You can do whatever maths you want. That has to be free-flowing. Today, about 500 of those vehicles declare something because they might come from Turkey or Switzerland or something like that, so they might be moving through what's called transit. In order to do that, they actually drive out of the harbour up to this he said zebra cross, roundabout, and around the harbour, outside, back in again, which is usually about a 20-minute drive, would you believe, with the traffic. They then go and have to park into an area that's owned by a company called Motus, and Motus take their declaration, they key it into a system, stamp, and then off you go. That takes about 40 minutes. If they don't do it, nobody knows. So we've got great control of the border at the moment. But we're going to take it back. So it's amazing, isn't it? So that self-declaration, for want of a better point of view, this is how, for me, almost as an outsider looking in on this from a technology perspective, what's the process today? How do we improve on it and automate it using technology? It's more a question of what? That's the process today. And it's complicated in the sense that you're then having a discussion with somebody in the EU, and we have had these discussions, who's saying, we want complete control and security of the border. Well, you haven't got it now. It's not there today. It's a really interesting dialogue that we're having, but we'll get there. So we said, how do we tackle this problem then? Those are the two main challenges, traceability and flow. Let's look at what happens, global best practice. And Maria touched on some of this, actually. So we've got one or two of these right. This is my 3 bullet points. It's not any publication like that. But we think there are 3 main themes, which is multiple borders, strategy, market segmentation, and intelligence-led. So I think, Maria, you're going down the same route of me, is what's the point of that driver handing over the piece of paper? You can get an awful lot more intelligence than that. And unless you go into the truck and search it and ask the driver where they're from, et cetera, then you're no better off. So multiple border strategy means you look at the continuous journey. So you're probably not just wanting to assess the premises. You want to know, where's it come from? Who do they work for? So you look at the entire journey. This we do today with people movement. So if you buy an airline ticket, we will know where you bought that ticket, roughly anywhere in the world. We know if you bought it with cash, credit card. We know if you bought it with some friends, with your family. So that we know when you get to the airport. We know when you get on that airplane. If we're not told that, there's a £2,000 fine to the airlines. We know when you get off the plane. So by the time you've arrived at the import controls, as it were, or passport control, sorry, at the point of arrival, import control, we know everything about you, and we've done a risk assessment, your criminal activity and all the rest of it. So the idea is we don't want you in the country if you're a criminal. There's no point asking you questions when you're here. So multiple border strategy is look at the life cycle of that journey, and we don't do any of that with goods at the moment. But if you talk to any haulier, any major retailer, any shipper, DHL, freight forward, etc., they know exactly where products are all the time. Amazon, fantastic service they give us, and Just Eat and people like that, they know exactly where your product is and tell you it's 2 more stops and then it will arrive. So they know that data. Government, we don't know that data. Market segmentation is another obvious one, which is you look at what trade is coming across that channel, you look at the types of product, you look at the types of organizations, and you determine the level of intervention or inspection or process that's required for that particular segmentation. So livestock is highly regulated. It's checked. It amazes me how livestock moves around around the supply chain, when you start following it through the chain. So the regulation there is absolutely phenomenal. And we don't need any more regulation and intervention on that. But there are huge areas where if BMW are moving gearboxes between their plants, as they do, across the channel, etc., why do we have to keep stopping and checking and declaring those gearboxes all the time. They just need to say they're moving gearboxes. That's what they're doing. So you can look at the segmentation and look at the risk analysis of those segments and the processes that are required for those segments, as opposed to just treating everything the same way. And the last one is market-led intelligence, which is the new world, data. Once you start getting the data from those freight forwarders and those organizations and retailers, and they are all ready to share that data, you've then got market intelligence that you can say, I want to look at products that have originated from that particular zone or that factory, or these particular items. So you can actually plan your intervention based on your intelligence, your market assessment in an informed way. And it's not about somebody turning up with a piece of paper at a barrier and saying, here's my papers, and then you do. The market intelligence is trying to read that declaration. Do I trust it or not? So that's what we looked at. And for freight, we looked at Sweden. So we've been working with the ex-head of Swedish Customs, Lars Carlson. They have a similar system to this, which includes all of that. You register your vehicle, your organisation, and as you approach from Norway into Sweden, the system says, oh, this guy's registered. These are the products. We know this person, low risk factor. They haven't got it fully automated, but they're probably one of the most advanced ones on this. And then the Canadians do it on some of the main routes between Canada-US border, which they call the FAST program or Platinum program. And these guys, I went to see this, it's really, really good system. The only reason why they're stopping those trucks, so you will register your business and you will tell the border a few hours before you're arriving, I'm going to arrive roughly at this time, here are my products, this is my driver, I'm registered, I'm a trusted trader as they call it. I don't like that term, but certified trader. And so they will go through. The only reason why they're stopping them at the moment is to check the driver ID, because it's still a passport control. So they're saying soon as we get automated trucks, God help us, they won't need to stop those trucks. So this exists. And then we thought, surely this must be the way forward. And if you look at it as a schematic, we've got these 4 points here just to illustrate how it works. So you need electronic notification before you get to the border. So this is the multiple border strategy. Tell me you're coming. You need some way of automating checks and risk assessments. Well, that's the goods manifest, the driver ID, the origin of the goods, etc. So getting that data, you can do the risk assessment using smart intelligent systems, which then inform the customs agents and the border force of where they think the risk is. That enables you to do all sorts of smart things at the port then. So for the low risk, known, accredited organizations, we can create virtual green lanes. For those that we think are higher risk, or we don't know them, or they haven't registered, we can force them through a slower route, perhaps. I'm not saying that's what we should do, but we could perhaps do that to encourage them into a more registered process. And that gives us some sort of automation at the border. You're not then relying on somebody handing over a piece of paper. So that's the principle in general. And we thought, are we mad? Is this doable? And then we visited Eurotunnel. There's a very busy chart. So I'm not expecting you to read it. It's taken from their 40-page guide on how to cross the Eurotunnel for transit people. They've got this nailed down, and it's exactly the process that we've been looking at. So when we went to visit these guys, we thought, wow, this is up and running. It's already done. And we followed it through the system. When you arrive in Calais from Ashford in Kent, it knows. Well, you arrive in Calais. You arrive in Ashford, you're already registered, they're expecting you, they scan you on the train, it tells the French system, this truck is now on the train, here are the customs declarations, they do the risk assessment, and by the time you get to France, you either go through a green lane or you go to amber lane to be stopped and checked. That's already there. It's not up and running because we don't use customs declarations just yet, but it's been tested. But this is what they will use. It'll only work on exports, because we haven't joined it, so it's not going to work on imports, which is a shame. We should do that. We should jump onto this, it really gave us some confidence that this is the way forward. The other factor of this is Eurotunnel own the port, they own the tunnel, and they own the other port, so they can create a single system, as it were, for their use. They also do the checks themselves. Customs don't do that. They control the whole thing because they want 90-minute SLA between motorway to motorway. So they don't want customs to get in the way, people like that. And we thought, well, if this works here, then why don't we just virtualize this system? Why don't we make this work for Dover, where you've got the port of Dover, DFDS ferries and Stena Line and the rest of it. So it's all different entities, and then the port of Calais. They're all different entities. But if you make a virtual version of this, something like this, then it could work. So we started trialing this. So again, it's a kind of an architecture diagram. It's called the future border architecture because we started thinking bigger and bigger about how this could develop into something more interesting. So not only are you, if you think there's this smart truck here, not only are you collecting the manifest of the goods and the information about the goods themselves, but you can collect other smart information, like the driver can be registered using mobile devices. So if you're applying for EU residency here, Mrs. Dunsmuir is German, and she applied for a UK residency, and she did it via the phone. And she said, "Oh, you've got a great app, Frank. It's not mine, but you can apply for UK residency on the phone using your passport. So it's digital identity system. We can use that for drivers. Far safer. They're not really checked today, but don't tell anyone that. So a whole range of things. Oh, and the unfortunate incident of smuggling people into the country in refrigerated lorries, which doesn't work. Absolute tragedy. If we put CO2 sensors and cameras inside refrigerated lorries, and there's no reason why we can't insist on that, then an integrated platform, a platform here that collects that information, any CO2 device, any CO2 registering device or camera, we've then got a way of controlling issues like that. And so it becomes a platform to integrate information about the journey, the entire journey, and the attributes of that journey, and make a risk assessment that they can then inform all the different agencies in a controlled manner. And it sits above the existing government systems, so you don't have to go spending hundreds of millions of pounds rewriting a customs system or anything like that. I won't go into full detail about that. I could talk about that forever. But this is our big challenge, is how do you make it real? Because this is Fujitsu saying to anyone that's interested in government, can we have a go at doing this and can we launch it? And the problem we've got is there's an awful lot of government departments, a heck of it. There's supposed to be 26 at the border, and to get them to agree on something, Maria's nodding, this is your week, isn't it? To get them to agree on something is virtually impossible. So we've gone down the route of, well, let's use the other stakeholders and industry. So we've got ports, manufacturers, freight forwarders, consultancies, a collection of specialist organisations, including NSF, involved in this consortium. And the idea is we'll build the prototype. We've got some early models working for goods vehicles bringing sugar into GB from France. And it works fine. But we really want to be working with the key border agencies, which we're hoping will start to get some traction in the next few weeks. It's challenging for them because they don't have full direction yet from ministers on, yes, this is what we want and this is how we're going to do it. And Border Force have a slightly different view to HMRC and. So it's a little bit challenging, but we think if we build it, then it'll encourage their at least interest in this. And I'm not saying this is the answer and the only answer. This is what we're thinking is a strategic way forward, and it's something that we should be piloting over the next few months with urgency. So we're hoping to get to test very, very quickly. We'll be using some of these organisations in that testing. The nice thing about these organisations is they by and large come to us. So NSF, we've met them through events and forums and sessions where they've said, we're really interested in this, we'd like to be part of this. They bring a tremendous amount of not just technical capability or technology, they bring intimate knowledge of their business and industry. So all of a sudden we're experts in food and livestock. All of a sudden we're experts in horse racing, would you believe? These guys are amazing. They're a two-man outfit in Dublin, and they're conquering the horse racing world on digitising horse health records. It's absolutely fantastic stuff. And we're now collaborating with them on a joint venture into Japan Racing Association, which I find out is our biggest customer globally. It's just bizarre. How did that happen? Driver Buddy, this guy's been in security for 30 years. What he doesn't know about security at the border. Gatekeeper run 800 lanes of the American-Mexican border with very sophisticated vehicle assessment devices, scanning devices, basically, so they can look for all sorts of issues. He's got some very interesting stories. But these guys have tremendous expertise as well as the technology. So one of the advantages we're talking about here is a great consortium, and it continues to grow. And NSF is a great example with Verify. We've probably been talking for a good year or so now about the possibility of working together. We'll have a memorandum of understanding in the next few days, and we'll look to trial some of these ideas with some real farms in Northern Ireland, hopefully in the coming weeks. I say hopefully in the coming weeks. It all depends on various factors, but I'm pretty confident that'll happen. And the beauty of this is that with a product like Verify, then we're able to share directly with government organisations the sort of accredited information about the trust that can be placed in the products that are moving in those particular vehicles or being exported, etc. It's not just livestock. It can go down to plant and animal product as well. So why would you be searching or checking or doing any further checks? For a lot of finished food products, it's just a document check that has to be done at the border. What's the value in that if I can give you all of this information? There's no point having the document check. It's completely irrelevant. So we're gradually moving that perspective, and our conversation with the EU has been, this is better than anything you've got. This is better than anything you operate at the border. And one of our strong advocates, Lars Carlson, was the guy that put the border systems in for Sweden and Norway. He was the ex-head of Swedish Customs. He's the ex-chair of the World Trade Organization. He's one of these really successful people. He's a big advocate of this, and he's pushing the EU in this direction of the smart border principle. And the idea that we'll start this program, and then we'll start rolling it out across the EU with a bit of luck, a bit of fingers crossed. That's me.
Gosh, I keep doing that. Apologies to the sound guys throwing your microphone packs around. Come out of my huge fee. Now, do we have any questions on borders for the next couple of minutes, or shall we move on? I'm sure I had lots of questions. Let's just give people a second. Any questions on borders? One of the things that you were mentioning that I thought was so interesting was about the people smuggling, which I know isn't it's not so relevant to businesses, but you were saying that an awful lot more could have been done by those measures. Who would do that? I mean, would that be the government? Would that be local authorities that would insist on some sort of plans along the way you were suggesting?
It's probably border force.
Yeah.
Which is part of the Home Office.
But then they would have to insist that to be accredited, you had to.
Yeah. So for example, that's a really good example with the unfortunate refrigerated container incident with the guys that died in there. So that truck went across to the EU with no consignment, and it came back with no consignment. It's a red flag, but we don't look at that stuff. So there were obvious indicators there that there's something wrong with this journey, but we're not looking at that stuff, as it were. We're allowing the freight to go back and forth. So Border Force are keen to look at ways of getting in intelligence and understanding how they can make some smart decisions. So this is stuff that they like. So they'll be the ones that would look at security, and arguably the security is the number one priority of the border, and then it's flow, and then it's revenue, would you believe?
Yeah, extraordinary. Any questions? Oh, yes, there's one. Can we get the microphone up to the middle of the aisle?
Get some water.
Or you could shout, and I could repeat it if anybody's having problems.
My question is, previously we've heard it takes several years to get to a system to manage all that customs things you talked about. With what you presented, it looks like it's a bit closer than several years away.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
That's a big assumption.
all the technology's there today. So in theory, we've got trials of it running with Turners, one of the major hauliers. So this works. Kuehne + Nagel will give me their data when we're ready. Uniserv do the same thing. So we don't have any shortage, and other organisations say, whatever data you want, we'll give it to you. So there's no shortage of willingness to help. The big challenge is going to be, can you do this in 9 months? No. We're too late, I think, for that. We have to do it in a segmented approach. So we have to get to a fallback position now for the end of the year. So some contingency needs to happen, I think, by the end of the year. And then we need to take the major hauliers and freight forwarders on as quickly as possible. And that will probably get us, for someone like Dover, it'll probably get us 80% plus of the traffic. And again, the huge proportion of that is Polish. So our target audience is Polish hauliers. It's not UK. So the dynamic is quite interesting, but we think we can onboard very, very quickly. The challenge is education and getting the agencies to use this in the right way. So it's probably a 3-year program to get it done. But you can make a lot of progress in a short period of time. That makes sense.